Hey, I'm Lorelei, registered dietitian nutritionist. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about meat analogues, or products that are designed to look, taste, maybe even have the texture of meat, but that, aren't. So this includes things like veggie burgers, veggie sausage, and these products have been around for a really long time, but recently we've seen an advance in... Hey, Joe.
I am not Joe.
Who could you be?
I am a Joe analog. I am like a Joe, but not a Joe.
I see.
I am a Joe-alog.
Yeah. Are you plant-based?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay. You're organic?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Very organic.
How did you come to be?
I don't know. One day I was Joe, and then I was like Joe, but not Joe. I'm a Joe-alog.
Oh, so you...
Where is your Lorelei-alog?
Yeah, I'm just Lorelei. I have no alog.
We are having a dialogue.
So the thing with meat analogs is they are maybe replacing meat in one's diet, but it is not meat that has then been turned into an analog. Well, this maybe...
If we're talking about meat analogs, I would eat them if they tasted like meat and weren't all that different.
Okay.
Much like I would eat a Joe if it tasted like Joe, but was not all that different.
I hope you wouldn't.
Whoa.
I'm not sure that this analog analogy is going to plague itself all the way through here. But we can talk a little bit about meat analogs and why one might choose to eat them and whether they're good choices or not. And
why would one do these things?
It kind of all comes back to, if you are not eating meat, what are your reasons for not eating meat? So if you are not eating meat because...
I am not eating meat now.
You're correct. But if you are not eating meat because you are looking out for the welfare of animals or for, religious reasons that often are also compassionate reasons, then these meat analogs are going to do the trick for you, right? So they are not harming or killing animals to create some of these meat analogs, like the Impossible burgers and things like that. But they taste just like meat, so you can get the meat experience without the animal getting involved.
So if they're choosing not to eat meat, but want to have the taste and feel of eating meat,
yes,
then they could eat a meat analog.
Yes.
Much like if you want to have the experience of knowing a Joe, you could have a Joe-alog if real Joe is not available.
Now, it is actually a pretty similar experience.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other reasons that you can think of, Joe-alog, that people might not want to eat meat?
If they think it's healthier to not eat meat.
Yeah. So do you think it is healthier to not eat meat?
I think all things in moderation can be relatively healthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with eating meat as part of a balanced diet.
That probably is actually relatively true. Some things are healthier than others. Some meat items are healthier than other meat items, and some non-meat items are healthier than
so confusing
other non-meat items. Yeah. Is a meat analog healthier than the meat for which it is substituting?
I guess it depends on how much of it you're eating and what it's made out of.
Yeah, what is it replacing? So are you having an Impossible burger instead of a quarter-pound beef hamburger? If so, it might be healthier. It's probably a little lower in saturated fat. If you substitute an Impossible burger for like a fillet of wild-caught salmon, it's... Okay, yeah, that's not actually... No.
Is it better for the environment to eat a meat analog instead of a meat?
And that's another reason why people might not eat meat. So we've kind of brought up three things: animal welfare, health, and the environment. Are meat analogs better for the environment than their meat counterparts?
I don't know.
Exactly. Well, there's not a perfect answer, and it depends on what it's replacing.
Perfect answer.
So cattle takes a lot of land to grow and raise to the point where it is edible for human consumption, whereas things like chicken don't take as much. So are you using this meat analog to substitute for cattle, or to substitute for chicken, or to substitute for maybe you would otherwise eat beans, in which case the fake meat actually may not be better.
What do the catalog eat? Are they mail order catalogs?
If we're talking about factory cattle, they usually eat things like grain that has been grown on an extensive amount of land and then used to feed cattle, as opposed to directly going to feed people.
What will the catalogs eat if you replace the cattle with the catalogs? How will you raise your beef substitute?
Well, yeah, so that requires some energy as well. It comes from other sources. So the question ends up being, is the amount of energy that goes into creating like an Impossible Burger, which is definitely processed, and some of the ingredients are definitely made in a laboratory, is it greater than or less than what it takes to feed?
Too complicated for Joelog.
Oh,
Joelog is going away.
It's broken down. Oh no. Meat analogs are really for people who are interested in the flavor of meat, but they just don't want the baggage that goes along with eating meat. These meat analogs, if you want to use them to replace meat because you are concerned about the welfare of animals, they 100% are going to get you there. If you want to use something like a processed meat product to replace meat because you're worried about your health or because you're worried about the environment, the question becomes a little bit more complicated and nuanced. It really depends specifically on what it's replacing. You know, you want to have a variety of foods. If that variety of foods includes certain meats from time to time, it's not necessarily more unhealthy than if you're eating no animal products, but a bunch of processed plant-based products. So we generally want to get closer to the bottom of the food chain, eating plant-based. And some of these processed meat analogs, they create another chain in the sense that you're taking plant-based ingredients, but then you're processing them and you're creating things in factories and you're adding flavorings and you're adding a lot of other stuff to them. So it takes it to the point where they're no longer quite as healthy or as great for the environment as something that is really plant-based, such as vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and legumes and grains and things like that that come out of the ground and you get them in more or less their whole form. If you're someone who's transitioning from a meat-eating diet to a plant-based diet, these meat analogs might be a really excellent transition because you can kind of wean yourself out of the habit of eating meat, but still be getting what you're craving. And then hopefully over time, you'll just eat less and less of those and start to incorporate more of the whole food plant-based items into your diet. I do know that a lot of vegetarians also don't eat meat because they don't want to eat animals, and they also have then no interest in eating anything that even resembles those animals. If you're not eating meat, do you actually want to eat something that sort of is like meat, or do you want to kind of distance yourself from that whole idea? I personally do consume some of these meat analogs. I like them, I think they're tasty, but I do think of them as kind of more of a treat and a little bit of a supplement to a more plant-based diet than the main centerpiece of my diet. None of us are perfect, and at the end of the day, we still have to feed ourselves, and feeding ourselves often is about more than just the nutrients we're putting in our body. So pleasure of eating and enjoyment in what we're eating and the experience of eating with others and being able to share food with others is also an important aspect of our consumption habits as humans. Everyone's going to come to this in a different way, and that may change over time, just as our diets evolve over time with our preferences, with our stage of life, and just with our own knowledge base. So today I actually wanted to show you how you can make your own veggie burgers at home, so that if you are craving something meat analogy, but you don't necessarily want to buy something that has been processed and comes to you in a package from the store, you can use some plant-based ingredients and some really nice seasonings to come up with something that is tasty, but might still fill that space for you or for people that you care about who are used to or like the idea of eating something that at least resembles meat. So let's move on to our veggie burger recipe. And you may actually notice that this is kind of similar. I did a vegetarian haggis recipe not too long ago, and there's some really similar ingredients in here. I actually really liked that that recipe and was kind of inspired by it because I thought it would make a great veggie burger mix. But we're going to use a lot of similar ingredients here. And there are a fair number of ingredients in this recipe, but I do think each one does add something that is going to be beneficial to the overall properties of these veggie burgers. So we're going to start off with some vegetables. I do like the idea of actually having some vegetables as opposed to just grains and beans in a veggie burger. So we're going to saute some onion and some garlic and some carrots and some mushrooms. And I actually really love mushrooms in a veggie burger because they give a really nice savory flavor, and the texture of mushrooms is pretty nice if you're trying to substitute for meat. You want to chop these really small before you saute them because we want to go for kind of a ground up texture. I'm not going to be putting these into the food processor or anything to like blend it or pulverize any of these ingredients. So you want to start with them small before you start cooking with them. Now, once the vegetables have sauteed, we can add some of the other ingredients. So I like to throw in the seasonings with the vegetables just to kind of let them bloom a little bit before adding other ingredients. And here I'm adding rosemary and thyme along with some cumin and salt. You can change up these seasonings based on what you want your veggie burgers to taste like. So if you want to go with more of like a Tex-Mex veggie burger, you might go with more cumin and add things like maybe paprika or even a chili powder seasoning. If you wanted to do something that was more like sausagey, you could add maybe like some sage and some fennel. You can do something like a curry flavored veggie burger if you want to. So change up the spices if you feel like you want something a little bit different. And this is where you have some options. Most of the other ingredients are going to absorb flavors real well, but they're not real strong in flavor themselves. Then we're going to add some chopped walnuts. This is going to add a little bit of healthy fat. And again, I think walnuts add a nice mild savory flavor to something like a veggie burger. And we're going to throw in some lentils, and we're going to put these in dry. If you want to use red lentils, they're going to cook a little faster, but depending on what you have, you can also use green lentils here. And we're going to add some broth to this mix, so the lentils are going to cook in that broth and get a little bit more seasoned through that way. So as opposed to using already cooked lentils, we're going to cook them along with everything here. I'm also going to use a cup of mashed up beans. You can cook these yourself, you can use canned, and I don't think it matters what kind of beans you use. The last time I made these, I used pinto beans. I know you can use like kidney beans or white beans. Today I'm using black beans because that's what I have. Different beans do have slightly different flavors, but as I said, the flavor of this mix as a whole is going to be more important than the flavor of the individual ingredients like beans, which is going to be pretty mild in comparison. And then we can go ahead and add in some broth. So I'm using about 1.5 cups of broth, and frankly, I just made this broth using some miso, which I like to do because I think miso is an easy thing to keep around. You could certainly use a veggie bouillon if you had that, or you can just buy store-made broth, or frankly, you could probably just use water, but you may have to adjust your seasonings accordingly because it will be a little less salty than if you have a broth that's a little bit more flavored. And then I'm going to throw in a little bit of soy sauce and some vinegar and bring everything to a simmer. After everything's come to a simmer, then we're going to add in some oats, and I'm going to use rolled oats, and these are going to absorb the rest of the moisture as the oats cook and kind of start to pull everything together. If you think of oatmeal and how kind of sticky and it can get, that's what we're working with here. That's what we want from the oats here, is something that's going to actually pull things together and help it to stick really nicely. Another ingredient that I'm going to add, and this is totally optional, but I had this around because I just recently made my own plant-based milk. So I'm going to use some of the pulp from that plant milk. Last time I made plant-based milk, I made an almond oat milk. So I have some almond oat pulp. I'm going to use about 1/2 cup. And this, frankly, is just a filler that is full of fiber. I'm using 1/2 cup, which means that we're going to probably get one more veggie burger out of this whole recipe than I would if I didn't use this ingredient. But I'm also going to probably need to add a little flavor because there is no flavor in this pulp. So I'm going to add an extra teaspoon of soy sauce here. And then I'm also going to add a teaspoon of smoke flavoring. Now this is certainly an optional ingredient, and smoke flavoring is probably the most processed ingredient I'm actually adding to this. So if you're concerned about the ingredients that go into making a smoke flavoring, just skip it and use a little bit more soy sauce. And this really is just to kind of offset the flavor that's going to get absorbed by adding this plant-based milk pulp to this mix. If you wanted to add something a little bit smoky, but you don't want to do the smoke flavoring, you could also use something like a smoked paprika in your spice blend that you're adding to this whole thing. Now, after all of this cooks together and you can see that the lentils are cooked and you can see that the oats are cooked and you get a really even consistency, we're going to add in 1 flax egg. This is also going to help everything to stick together, but adding flaxseed means that we're also adding a little bit of the omega-3 fatty acids that are essential in our diet. So a flax egg is a tablespoon of ground flaxseed plus about 3 tablespoons of water. Mix it together, let it sit for maybe 5 minutes or so before you add it in. And then you should end up with a mix that has a consistency that can stick together but isn't too liquidy, and we're going to use this to form our burger patties. Once all your stuff is cooked, it's gonna just look like a bunch of mush, which is actually kind of what you want because that's gonna hold together really well to form your veggie burger. Before you do that though, taste it. So I'm gonna taste mine, just take a little pinch. It's still pretty hot. You may wanna let it cool a bit longer, but mine needs a little more salt. So at this point, you can and should adjust your seasonings because it's really still easy to get them in there. So you can add more salt, you could add some pepper, you can add like garlic powder or onion powder if you need some more savory flavor, or something like cumin or chili powder, or you could make it spicy. So anything that you need to add seasoning wise, do it now before you make your burgers, and then we can go ahead and shape them and bake them. I've got the oven preheating to about 400. Is this going to taste exactly like meat? No. But will it taste good? Yes, it absolutely can. So that's what we're going for. A taste that you like. It doesn't need to be a taste that like 100% thoroughly represents meat. This is also a time to test and see if like your lentils or your oats are not cooked through. You probably want to put it back on the stove for a little while. I had everything cooking for about 20-25 minutes. So you really need the dry ingredients to absorb the moisture before you bake it in the oven, because that's just going to dry things out more. We can just shape these with our hands, but I'm actually going to use a 1/2 cup measure just to help out a little bit. I'm not sure how many it's going to make. I'm going to pat these flat. They're not going to spread or anything. This isn't like baking cookies, so you don't have to worry if they're near each other. They really are they might feel really wet, but that's really what the oven is for, is to dry them out. And you can adjust the shape or size if you want them to be something different. I think if you do like big globs, it's gonna take a lot longer for them to cook. So I do think pressing them flat is gonna be helpful. You're gonna wanna put this on something non-stick because it is probably going to stick otherwise. So I'm gonna use a silicone mat. You could use some parchment paper. We're gonna cook it on one side. We're gonna flip it over, cook it the rest of the time on the other side. Alternatively, you could fry these in a pan. Heat some oil in a pan, cook it on one side until it gets a little browned on one side and it's holding together. Flip it over and cook it on the other side. Okay, so I was only able to fit 7 on my pan, but I still have more mix left. So this batch is gonna make at least 8 large-sized veggie burgers. And veggie burgers, of course, you can eat like a burger. Put it on a bun, add whatever toppings you like. But there are other things you can do with these too. You can break one up and put it on top of a salad. You could crumble it into a stir fry. And these patties, once they're cooked, they actually freeze really well. So you can then take them out another time and heat them up and use them later on. I'm actually gonna store some of the mix as well, so you can keep that in the fridge. And then you could bake it later, you can fry it up later if you wanna do a fried burger instead of a baked one. But I'm gonna get as many of them baked as I can, because then of course, the ones that I'm not gonna eat right away, I can put in the freezer. I could guess about how long these are gonna bake, but I'm not sure. I generally keep an eye on them, but I'll let you know. So I did about 20 minutes per side on these veggie burgers, and now they are done. We got 7 plus I got another one still in the fridge that I'll bake later. If you wanted to make them smaller, you could get more. Let's taste them.
Meat-a-log, meat-a-log, meat-a-log.
Oh.
Joe-a-log is back.
How do I get regular Joe back?
Let me see if I can get him.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, real Joe. I was afraid it was going to be me and Joe-a-log from here on out.
Secretly, I am Joe-a-log.
These aren't exactly a meat analog. We're sort of trying to recreate a veggie burger, but it's not going to taste exactly like meat.
Sure, it's meat adjacent.
Meat adjacent, right. So we're using it in the same way we would use a meat.
And if you just want to eat a little less meat, for whatever good it may do you or anyone else,
so yeah,
it's an option.
So meat analogs, which are designed to actually try to replicate meat, is one way to eat less meat. And then this way is maybe a step beyond that, right? So that this is actually made with whole foods. It doesn't taste exactly like meat.
It still tastes pretty good. I've had
it
them
can
before.
represent it on the plate. You want to taste some?
Nope, we got food coming, so.
We have real food coming, but I'm going to taste this.
It is real food.
It is real food, whether it is real meat or not. And this way, you can have something that is meat-like, but it is very whole food plant-based, and it has been processed mostly by you, as opposed to by a manufacturer where more energy is being used, and where we're not 100% sure of the source of everything. We have protein in here from the beans and the lentils, and the nuts are also going to add some protein. We've definitely got some fiber in here. So it's a good combination of ingredients. It's going to provide a lot of nutrition. So this is nutritionally dense, and you're not going to get some of the saturated fat that you would get with meat, or sometimes even those meat analogs are made with things like palm oil, which is a saturated fat. And it's good. It's up to you to spice it so that it does taste good. And then of course, like a burger, add condiments when you make your burger. It should be enjoyable, hopefully as enjoyable as its meat counterpart. We're also saving the animals, but this one also environmentally more beneficial because we're eating lower on that food chain. I hope this was interesting and enjoyable. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, of course. And I hope you'll join me again. This is tasty. I like it a lot. So you used to be Joe, and then you transformed into a Joe-a-log.
Yes.
So you replaced the actual Joe.
I don't know what happened to actual Joe. I am just a Joe-a-log.
I don't quite understand the purpose then.
If it's a fake sausage, why would it be fake? It is still a sausage?
It is real, but it's not sausage in the sense that traditionally sausage is made from like pork. It's made from the flesh of an animal.
But you can still sausage something, so you're sausaging plants.
What? Sausage isn't really a verb so much as you might think.
Joe-a-log can do many things with grammar.
Okay. Yes, you can transform it into something else, apparently. Okay.
I was Joe-a-log all the time.
You were Joe all the time?
And Joe-a-log. Or is Joe just Joe-a-log different?
Okay. Again.
Meat-a-log. We've entered the a-log zone.